Welcome, everyone, to Wild Divine Bliss, the Wild Divine Bliss podcast today. And we have an amazing guest with us. I'm so excited to have Teri Degler. She's an award-winning author of 12 books to her credit, including The Fiery Muse, Creativity in the Spiritual Quest, which also focuses on Kundalini energy, The Divine Feminine Fire, Creativity and Your Yearning to Express Yourself. And Teri has written on Tantra, yoga philosophy, and the lives of highly creative mystics. She's a student of Sanskrit. She has followed much of, and her work is focused much on the divine feminine, known as the Shakti in Hinduism, and sometimes surprising parallels are found in Sophia in the Old Testament in Christianity and the Shekinah in Jewish mysticism. Teri's books have been translated into French, German, and Italian. Oh, that's a lot. Her freelance writing on topics ranging from parenting to environmental activism have appeared in many publications. And her most recent book is the literary biography of Kashmiri yogi Gopi Krishna, a biography of Kundalini consciousness and our evolution to enlightenment. And Teri is originally from Idaho, and she lives in Toronto and holds a master's degree from the University of New Mexico.
Wow.
So how did I not know that from the University of New Mexico? It's like I used to live there too. I lived in Santa Fe.
Oh,
Yeah.
a sister lived in Santa Fe. She's passed away now, but yeah.
So
And
did you?
sister now,
Yeah.
yeah.
So UNM. Yeah. Wow. Albuquerque.
Oh no, we have a connection we didn't even know about.
I know, that's amazing. And I find it's always like that when I end up interviewing my podcast guests or actually anybody who's involved in Kundalini, researching Kundalini, has had a Kundalini activation. It's amazing. We always end up having these incredible connections with each other, which makes you wonder, So,
It does, doesn't it?
yeah.
So much we don't
So,
know about.
what's that?
Oh, there's so much in the universe that we don't know about.
I know.
There's
Yeah. And it's
yeah.
so true. So I'm so honored to have you here today because this has been like your lifelong work. And I'm really curious as to what was your original, I should say, Kundalini experience. How did this all start for you?
It well, it really started when I was a kid. I was a
Mm-hmm.
teenager. I don't have any idea how old I was. I think I must have been about 14. But often when I told this story, I said I was 12, but that doesn't make sense. So I was about 14, but like I think a lot of kids and a lot of young people who have kind of an inner love of the divine, or you're wondering about something as a kid, you can't put it in those words, but something about church doesn't feel right. And you start hearing about the Bible and you think you hear about this God that's just full of love and compassion and mercy. And then you hear about people getting sent to hell for eternity. And you're going like, that does
What?
make sense. Like, that doesn't make sense. This can't be
Exactly.
happening. So I don't know. I went to church. My parents, this is a US broadcast, I guess, with you, Corinne. So I would say Episcopal church that I was raised in. Here in Canada, we call it Anglican, like they do in Britain, but Episcopal church. And
Mm-hmm.
I liked it, and it was important to me. And then about when I was, I guess, in junior high, I joined something called Job's Daughters. This was a big
Oh,
deal in the States in those days. You were daughters of Shriners, the Shriners who do all that good work, for
oh,
kids,
wow.
Shriners hospitals and so on. So Job's Daughters were the girls and Dimale were the sons you could be. So I joined Job's Daughters, and I lived in this really tiny town, less than 2,000 people in Idaho. And this was a big deal to be a Job's Daughters. You got to wear these white satin robes and
Oh, wow.
you felt like angels, right? But now I look back on it, and the symbology was amazing because there were seven of the young women girls sat in a semicircle in the middle, and then there were 3, the queen, the head of the Joe's Daughters, and the 2 princesses sat at the top. So all this Kundalini symbolism that I saw years
Wow.
later, right? Anyway, I loved Job's Daughters because it was so pretty and it was
Oh,
so
wow.
beautiful. It was just beautiful and the music was beautiful and the symbology. I didn't realize then, but I was drawn to it, right?
Mhm.
Anyway, we had a grand guardian who was, the adult who oversaw everything. And so I was about 14, I think, and I decided I had to quit. I
Oh.
couldn't be a Job's daughter because I was an atheist. And I was
Oh, interesting.
I was an atheist because there were these contradictions in the Bible between. I couldn't even put it in words, and I just knew there were contradictions, and I particularly didn't like this idea of anybody getting sent to hell for eternity. I couldn't do that. I couldn't do it, so how could this loving God do that to somebody? So I was very confused. So I quit Job's Daughters. So the grand guardian, and this is the moment that triggered the profound mystical experience that I had at
Wow.
that time. She wrote me a letter, and I can still say it. I start crying when I even think about it. I can
Yeah.
see the paper today, and I know she wrote a lot of stuff about, why I was mistaken, and that God wasn't, I'd misunderstood. But she had these words underlined that said, "God is love." And she underlined
Mm.
it like 3 times or 2 times. And I can
Wow.
see her she had beautiful handwriting, and I can see the nice blue stationery she wrote it on. And I jumped up, and this is Idaho, right? It's very
Yeah.
cowboy country. And I ran outside and I jumped on my horse. And I didn't have a saddle or a bridle but that I was riding all the time, so this felt
Yeah.
to somebody who hasn't never ridden, that sounds like a big deal, but for me, it wasn't. I jumped on the horse and I grabbed the mane, and I started galloping around the pasture on my horse,
Wow.
and I don't know, I'm sure you've seen this, you're in the West, I don't know what it's like in California, but in the Rockies, a lot of times when you look at the West, and at sunset time, and there's dark clouds coming. It was going to rain, which was rare event. I mean, we love rain out there because you always want water. So the black clouds are gathering in the sky, and the sun is kind of slanting down under the clouds.
Oh,
So it's
beautiful.
radiant looking, and I'm galloping around on this horse, just hanging on, and I'm crying because these words, "God is love," I knew it was true. I knew it was true at some level that went
Yeah.
absolutely in piercing my soul. I didn't understand it. I didn't know I just knew it was true. And I knew I had heard truth. And so I'm galloping around on this horse, and the sun's rays are cutting down. And here's the part where I don't know what. Looking back on it years later, I went, "Oh my God, that was a completely experience."
Yeah.
But I don't know because I don't know what was light, and I don't know what was really the sun. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. I do. I do.
I
Yeah.
don't know what was real visionary experience of the divine and what was just that beautiful light. I don't know. But
Mhm.
something happened as I'm riding around, and I felt myself sort of dissolve, and I felt myself
Wow.
that I was one with the horse, and for this brief moment, I just sort of dissolved, and it took me years to put it into words, but ha I knew then I was one with the horse, but I didn't understand. Later, I could think back on that feeling, I knew I was one with everything. All boundaries sort of dissolved.
Mhm.
And that's why I think it was a profound, truly mystical experience, a
Absolutely.
or a Kundalini experience, right? So
Wow.
after that, and then we can get back into this later, but then I had
Yeah.
huge creative outpouring. And I had that anyway. I was always drawing and painting, but then I had to draw, I had to paint, I had to write. It was Oh, some of it's really bad teenage stuff, you know? Yeah, and I'm like, sprawling my poetry across my drawings and, it's a bit embarrassing now, but, some of it was quite good that I wrote. So that was this profound triggering of creativity and spiritual awareness. And I'm not sure from then on, I'm not sure if it started before, but I became fascinated with religion. And I started,
Oh.
when I was about 8 years old, I'd been exposed to my brother had a friend who was a Baha'i. He was in
Ooh,
university, and he brought this Baha'i friend home, and the Baha'i friend was trying to explain to me how all the avatars, all the great leaders of all the religions were respected, and somehow that made sense to me. And
right.
then at about this time, I got interested in Unitarianism, and of course, there wasn't a Unitarian church in Gooding, Idaho.
Mhm.
I don't even know if there was one in Idaho. I don't know.
Wow.
Not even 1,000,000 people in Idaho in those days. So but I got fascinated. I started reading about it, and this idea that all the religious masters, spiritual founders should be respected. It just made sense to me.
Mhm. Yeah.
There was this part of me that was yearning for spirituality that was triggered by that very clearly in my mind now when I look, very truly cleared by that, um, thing on the horse, that mystical,
Yeah.
whatever it was, I don't know. But there was also this wild, crazy cowgirl part of me. And by the time I was 14, 15, I was drinking, I was getting into trouble. I
Oh,
was,
you
I
too.
was,
Me too.
writing videos and falling in love with cowboys. And, it was just wild and crazy. But there was this dichotomy. And I
Yeah.
think that dichotomy exists to this very day. Matter of fact, I'm
Mhm.
about it right now. Now that I'm almost 78, I'm 77, I'll be 78 in a couple months, and
Oh.
it's still there. It's still there, that dichotomy between that wild, crazy person and that
Uh-huh.
yearning for spirituality. So that was the first spiritual experience, and there were a couple more after that that I can talk about or not, if you're
Yeah, how profound, and I think what's so interesting is actually you and I share that. It's like that wild, crazy piece, and yet that yearning for the divine, and it just never stops. It doesn't shut up. There's like nothing you can do to make it go away.
Yes.
But then there's this like complete other side that's completely like out of the box and has to be creative. And
Mm.
that's, where I really resonate with your story. It's like there is no, I say, if I'm not allowing this energy to move through me, there's a German word for it called verklempt. And it's like you just get kind of like tied up in a knot and you can make yourself sick
Yeah.
if you don't like literally like let out the energy. That's amazing. I also had horses in when I grew up too.
Oh,
That's wow, I love that's amazing. So tell me after that, what were some other, let's say more other
I
key spiritual
then,
experiences that
the next one really,
yeah.
I mean, again, there was that dichotomy. I was reading
Oh.
about religions. I was fascinated
Mhm.
with philosophy. I got to university. You know, studied life, and I had a pretty rocky childhood, in the sense, not, financially. We were fairly financially well off, so that was not an issue. But my dad was an alcoholic. I mean, I
Oh.
think, and then my mom was pretty neurotic. And now I look back on her and I see, of course, she was neurotic. She was living with this alcohol.
Well, like you and I share that too in our stories. That's
So,
really funny.
so I think that
Wow.
part of me was always looking for love, so I was
Yeah.
always, like, I wanted some guy to love me, and I thought that would
Mhm.
solve my problem. So a lot of my life around university, I mean, there was a part of that was just this, "Oh, I need some man to tell me I'm good." And part of that was the times, right? These were
Yeah.
still the late '60s, up to the early '70s, and, the women's movement was really getting going, and it hadn't made its way to Idaho by the time I made it to the University of New Mexico. Things were quite a bit wilder there.
Oh,
But,
wow.
I mean, in terms of feminism, so I didn't I thought women needed a man to tell them they were okay, right?
Oh, wow,
And that was
interesting, yeah.
partly the time, partly my generation, until my generation really broke out of that mold, but we had to break out of it, and
Yeah.
it was a little later breaking out of it. So then, though, the next experience, and I think this is the one that really started the spiritual search.
Hmm.
I mean, really got me focused on it. And I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and everybody, this was 1970, 71, and
Oh.
everybody's eating peyote and reading things like Carlos Castaneda, and you're gonna
Oh
get
my gosh, wow.
enlightened by eating peyote buttons or something, right? But, and I had this boyfriend who was very into this, and so we decided to drop acid one night.
Okay.
I've never done it since, it didn't work, didn't have anything, so I thought, "Well, you wasted a lot of money on these drugs,
Oh,
right?"
that's funny. So what you did the experience didn't do much for you? The
And I'm going, "Oh, no." And he says, like, "You're gonna eat it, and we're gonna throw up," but it was all, and he's sitting there reading William James' Variety of Religious Experience, because we're into transcendental stuff. We're gonna have a, we're not taking drugs to get high, we're taking drugs
yeah.
to open the doors of perception, right?
Yeah, totally.
Oh, God. Anyway, but something happened. And,
Yeah.
later on, and I told you, mentioned in my bio that I wrote this biography of Gopi Krishna.
Mhm.
He would always say, and he was not a guru. I think it's really important to say that. Gopi Krishna was not a guru.
Oh, I don't think I realized that. How
No,
interesting.
he spent his life trying to convince people that research needed to be done into Kundalini. That was
Mhm.
his focus. So, but anyway, he would say that a mystical experience, you can't help treating him a little bit like a guru because he was an enlightened yogi, but still, he would say a mystical experience could not be triggered by drugs. And I think that's true. No, he would say a mystical experience is not a drug experience, and they're not the same thing. And I think that's
Huh.
true. But something happened to me that night, and it triggered a mystical experience.
Okay.
And the
Yeah.
mystical experience was the next thing that really changed my life. So, so we did all these drugs or whatever, and at some point, I looked down at a candle, right? Imagine this. This is 1971. It's Albuquerque, New Mexico. You brick and board bookshelves, right? Like
Mhm.
every student had. And I've got these candles that I had made
Nice.
on the thing, and I looked down into this, to the point of the candle. And the light from the candle starts to radiate out, and it just keeps radiating. And it
Hmm.
radiates, and it goes out and out and out until I look down and I can see that there are no boundaries. There are no
Oh.
boundaries. There is no boundary in me. There is nothing but this light. There's nothing but light. And I can see it with my eyes. I see it. And again, like that God is love thing, I know this is true. There
Right.
is
Yeah.
nothing but this light. And I'm looking at it and I dissolve. And for the next few days, I wasn't much on eating meat anyway. And I became this rabid vegetarian because I couldn't kill an animal because
Mhm.
everything was alive. And then I couldn't eat a carrot because the carrot was alive. Then I couldn't eat an egg because the egg was alive.
Wow.
So finally I went, "Okay, I'm just gonna be a vegetarian." Finally, I had to eat. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I got this idea in my mind that I had to go to Europe.
Okay.
And I'd been to
Oh.
Austria the summer before hitchhiking around, and I'd met this wonderful woman named Jutta Heimgartner, and, which we would say Judith in English, but Utah, I had to go to Austria. It was in my mind. So I sold my car for $50. I sold my
Uh-huh.
for $100. I sold my bongo drums. I sold all my hippie accoutrement, and I bought a
You're like,
one
"That's it. The call is over there."
so I went one-way ticket to Vienna. One-way ticket
One
to Vienna.
way.
And
All
after I
following your
and I
intuition.
left
Just
I had 2 sisters there that I didn't even think about leaving them. I left them to they're half sisters, but I left them. I left this guy I was living with. I just said, "Goodbye, everybody. I'm going to I bought a one-way ticket to Vienna." And
So
then
that
I
was
went
just very from an intuition, pure
into it.
gut feeling like this is the thing to do.
Yeah, and,
Wow.
I at 77, I'm not quite as, um, sure that everything's gonna turn out all right as I was at 22 or 21. And anyway, I went to Vienna, and that was and again, that's another huge story, but, that was where I met the person that eventually totally got me on a spirit. Met a series of people that put me on a totally on a spiritual path. Not that cowgirl
No,
that
but it sounds like you already had been on a
but I
spiritual
was
path.
very much focused. I knew it was a
Mm,
spiritual path, and it's become so trite to even say spiritual path or spiritual
mhm.
journey, but I knew it. I knew what I had to do. I knew I had to understand this stuff, and at some point, I knew I had to write about it. So,
Wow.
but it was very clear that I needed to do this. No, again, the whole story, it would be another hour to tell you the whole story, what
And
happened.
this
Yeah,
another
I know, I
podcast,
know.
right?
But then I got there and and I ended up, eventually meeting one of the people that I met there. Well, both of them taught me about meditation. I learned about meditation. I started doing yoga. And
Oh,
this
fascinating. So you
yeah, in
hadn't been
July,
meditating
very early.
before this. So I find you
Oh,
hadn't
I never meditated. I never tried to
wow.
meditate. Even with all that stuff about, wanting to expand
Yeah.
consciousness. I didn't really get it. I was a hippie girl.
Yeah, but still,
Uh,
it's like but it's amazing you still had those experiences both of utterly dissolving. And it
yes.
didn't matter whether it was because you were looking at the beauty while you were riding your horse, thinking about how God is love, or whether it's being on a psychedelic experience, which does break
Mhm.
down the barriers of your like default mode network in your brain. And I've heard so many people talk about these profound spiritual experiences that they've had, and who knows, maybe Gopi Krishna didn't come across them when he wrote those books. Who knows?
Who knows?
But I think,
But
yeah.
I do think it's a distinction. I think
Hmm.
there's a distinction between the drug experience being a spiritual experience and like I said, I know, and so I can certainly assume that other people have had profound spiritual experiences triggered by that. But
Absolutely.
we need to I think there's a little bit too much I worry about people just doing drugs, today. And we're
Yeah,
already
to just make that to believe that that's the only path. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
yeah, I agree. There are many different paths, and honestly, like I've done several different types of psychedelics, and yet still, the most profound experiences I've had have not been with psychedelics.
yeah.
I've had the most profound ones were literally spontaneous. Like I had one of those too, where I was driving. It was in New Mexico, driving from Santa Fe to Black Mesa, where I used to live, and I remember looking at the sky, going, "Oh, the earth loves the sky." And it was just like and all of a sudden, it was like my consciousness just, like, utterly expanded. It was like it took about a month for everything to get back in order, but it was I knew that I was saying I came back to my true self, and I could see so much, and I had that infinite love running through me that was it was so profound, but it was that one thought. Just the one thought, and I think that's so interesting with you as well. It's like that one thought opened up the door
Yes.
to something that, even when you take psychedelics to inspire these experiences, you may still not get to that door. That
Yes.
door may not be opened, you know?
And maybe I don't know now or later we can talk about whether that matters.
Yeah, I don't know that it
The
matters.
door opening matters, but I
Yeah,
don't some of us have had these profound spiritual experiences and other people haven't. And I don't and my experience is that that is what doesn't matter. That
mhm,
um, what we're talking about is the transformation of consciousness. So when you had that experience, your consciousness transformed. Something happened.
yeah,
Your very consciousness was different after that experience than it was before that experience. And that's what, well, Gopi Krishna was talking about, Teilhard de Chardin was talking about it,
Hmm.
Maurice Buck was talking about it. There have been many great thinkers throughout history who tried to tell us that the change in consciousness was the important thing.
Yeah, so true.
We've gotten off, not you and I, but I think
Yeah,
we're talking a lot about a transformation of consciousness. And people think if they haven't had a Kundalini experience like that, or a profound experience that just knocks you off your feet, that they're not necessarily transforming. And whereas this gradual transformation, you might not ever notice it. You just have to be
exactly. Exactly.
transforming.
100%. You know, like I did some research for a talk I just gave, and I looked at the similarities between the end result of, let's say, a profound Kundalini experience and what long-term meditation practitioners experience,
Mm.
and it's the same thing, which I thought is really interesting. It's like you can get there through long-term meditation practice as well. So it was really interesting because I like looking at the data, and
Yeah,
that's what the
and you
data was
don't
showing. Yeah.
necessarily, I know people who've had, like, have had really profound experiences. We hear more and more, there's upset with it. There's
Yeah.
even sometimes extreme difficulty, I would say mental agony with it.
Yeah.
That I don't know if it is psychotic experiences can be triggered, or if it is that we're mistaken for I don't know. And that was another thing Gopi Krishna talked about. Do the research. Let's figure it out. Let's find
Yeah.
out what's going on, right? Because we don't know yet. And in the
No.
1990s, there was a lot of emphasis on that research, and not too much has been. I mean, people are doing more on meditation and how that affects the mind, and um, things like that. But we still don't understand some of these profound experiences and how difficult they can be for people. So,
Yeah. That's, it's like there have been some studies now that at least look at like a general demographic, because there's by Wollicott. She's done two. You're probably familiar with those.
yeah.
And then, of course, the Emerging Sciences Foundation. So altogether, it's been 900 people now who've been studied from a, let's say, qualitative perspective,
Mhm.
really looking at what was your experience and how did it affect you? Did you have mental health issues before or not or after? And it was really interesting to look at like all of the different data from 900 people now. We can look at what's been happening for them. And one of the things I found so interesting is that it looked like, from what I saw in the data, it's like, and also what Wollicott talked about in one of her papers is, generally speaking, people who experience the psychosis aspect are people who've had mental health issues before, which I thought was really
That's
interesting.
really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I'm
that,
familiar with her
yeah.
work. I hadn't read the most recent paper. Yeah.
Yeah, those, and I'll send them over to you too. I mean, I try to track when new ones come because it's always like, oh, I'm so glad people are finally starting to do the research around this. And it will be interesting to actually, I just heard of another study where they're able to take people who can activate their Kundalini sitting there, and they're doing brainwave studies, and it showed that they're high in gamma waves. So I thought, we're getting somewhere. We're getting closer and closer to understanding this.
Interesting.
Yeah, we're getting closer and closer. If this episode is resonating, you might want to join the Wild Divine Bliss community. We have current research, host live conversations, and create intelligent dialogue around Kundalini and spontaneous spiritual experiences. You'll find all the details at wilddivinebliss.com. Back to the episode. So I'm really curious, were there other experiences aside from that that helped to shape, like, how did you get into thinking about creativity and Kundalini together?
I think, again, this was so I started, well, let's start back with Again, if I keep talking about Gopi Krishna, you're gonna think I'm a guru-ite. That's
No, not at all. He's got a lot of his
so,
perspective is phenomenal. Yeah.
important to say he wasn't a guru. Um, because I'm not a follower in that sense, but yet, obviously he really influenced my life with his research into Kundalini. So at some point, this Kundalini hypothesis got developed, and the Kundalini hypothesis said, and the Emerging Sciences Foundation is really familiar with this too and doing some work on it. But the idea was that Kundalini is responsible for mystical experience, phenomena associated with near-death experience, like so that phenomena of light and
Mhm.
of bliss and wonder that is often associated with NDEs, with some forms of paranormal experience, which, if we look at in Christianity and Buddhism and Hinduism, in Christianity, they're called charism. So the Bible's full of stuff with paranormal experiences,
Yeah.
dreams being
Mhm.
prophetic and healing and all kinds of things like that we tend to go today. Oh, that's weird stuff. We don't want anything to do with that, right? But there's a long history of it. And in Hinduism, in the yogic tradition, they're called siddhis. I'm sure you're familiar with this.
Mhm.
And they're the powers that were supposed to be brought about with the awakening of yoga. And then in Tantric Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism, specifically, they're called idis. But they're also
Iddies.
believed that
Okay.
that there's
Mhm.
an awakening along with spirituality.
You
So
said
the
that's with
mystical experience,
tantric or Tibetan you were
or
saying with the Iddies? Which
the
tradition was that?
Buddhist, but
Buddhist.
but I only know it in Tibetan Buddhism. So
Oh,
I'm not
wow, fascinating.
Buddhist. So we have cities and spelled exactly the same way without the S, idis. So
Oh, interesting, yeah.
you can see how the word uh there, and there's some debate really which came first. So I don't know.
Mhm. It makes
Um
sense, yeah.
anyway, so we've got mystical experience, the phenomena associated with NDEs, some I would say so paranormal experiences, and I'm forgetting something. I can't remember what it was. Oh, and the one we're talking about, inspired creativity and genius.
Yes.
So this was Gopi Krishna made the point. Well, okay, obviously we can't put prana under a microscope yet. We can't find this stuff in the body that we call Kundalini, which is this intensified form of life energy, right? So, but if you took people from these categories, so somebody from the mystical, let's say a mystic who was highly creative, or you took a highly mystical person and a highly creative person, you would find similarities. You would find, and
Mm.
we're talking about particularly inspired creativity. So the kind
Wow.
of creativity that just comes to you. You
Yeah.
can't, not sitting down and slogging, but it's profound creativity. So that was my first interest, and that's what you just asked,
Yeah.
how did I get interested? It was from that Kundalini hypothesis. And I read that hypothesis and I went, "That's what happened to me. Oh my god." I had never made the connection between that time when I was riding the horse,
Mhm.
uh, filled with this divine love, this knowing that God is love, that divine love is what matters, and this creative outpouring. The acceptance experience, the one in Albuquerque, it changed my life, but I was writing then, I was really knew that writing I needed to write. I had to write
Mhm.
it. So that one, and then another third experience that happened again that triggered just another outpouring of creativity. So then I started to
Wow.
realize that what Gopi Krishna said this was true. It was right. It happened.
Mhm.
I felt it in myself. I'd had the mystical experience. I'd had the inspired creativity. And I also, people get kind of hung up on Kundalini experience when in the tantric tradition, really, hatha yoga. and Tantra, where we hear really the clearest references to Kundalini. And we get hung up on these ideas of the energy rushing up the spine and the feeling of heat. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we get hung up on that, and we shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
For
Agreed.
me, I'd had those, and they're important. And those of us who've had them, boy, they knock you off your feet, right? So if you're having them, you have to pay attention to them.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say, oh, they're not important or they don't matter, because, like I say, they knock you off your feet if you've had them.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the important thing is that what I saw then was this transformation in consciousness. Something was happening in my consciousness. Something was happening in the way I dealt with the world, the way I lived in the world.
Mm.
You talking about that same thing with you and the wild divine bliss,
Yeah.
this idea of this feminine energy rushing through your body. And we can talk about that a little bit more if you want to.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Kundalini, but that was my first
wow.
awareness of mysticism and creativity being one, and being somehow connected. Like, we go through life, billions of creative people in the world have no sense that they might be a hardcore atheist. They have no sense that this energy that is running through them is actually this same divine energy,
Yeah.
whether they recognize it or not, or give it a name.
And
It's
then I've met people you can feel the energy like coming off of them because I can feel people's energy fields every now and then. It's like, and then it's massive, but they don't realize that this is that same energy because there's no framework for it. I think it's more like I'm just creative and I just feel connected. Sometimes and they download the most amazing things.
but
Yeah.
I
It's more like it bypasses regular consciousness.
Yeah, a framework, that was another important thing that you
Yeah.
asked about, that I
Mm-hmm. Yes.
eh, having these experiences and having some kind of framework. Like when I was a kid and I had no framework, but by
Yeah.
the time I started reading about this and learning about it, by the time I had the third really profound experience, which was more like a experience, like it lasted a really long time, several weeks, where I was just in a state of otherness, let's say.
Wow. I want to hear about that too.
Oh, no, no. It's crazy. Like crazy experiences. But I can tell you about it. But that having a framework when you go through something really profound like that helps. And for me, that framework was this um, framework that Gopi Krishna built. That he said,
Yeah.
we've got these. This is how this is seen. It's been seen for centuries and centuries and centuries. And these yogis were in a sense the scientists of their day, right?
Yeah, that's a good
They
point.
and they still are, to a certain extent. They had these experiences, and they went into their bodies and they said, oh, this is what's happening with me. And they talked about it, or they wrote, depending on the timing and history, or it was written about, but these yogis were telling us what went on. They were feeling the energy run up their body. They were feeling the sense of heat. They were feeling these things. And so they wrote about them and they talked about them. And they gave us this framework. So if you have some kind of a framework, you can go, oh, that's what's happening to me. If
Yeah.
you don't have a framework, it's just terrifying, I
Yeah,
think.
or you just don't
You don't
know, like
what is happening to me? My whole life is turned upside down. And the second experience did turn my whole life upside down. I left Albuquerque and goodbye, everybody. I bought a one-way ticket. One way. I had a one-way ticket and $75.
and you're like, "I'm going, bye. I'm sure it's gonna
Bye.
turn
I
out."
want
And it
$75.
did turn
I'll be
out,
okay.
you ended up
I'll
there.
be okay.
Yeah.
Like I say, at the end of life, maybe maybe I don't have enough time left out for everything to work out. I do. But maybe I've lost some of that, and I don't wanna lose it, that sense.
No, definitely not, but it worked out.
But again, that's one of
Yeah.
the things in my life
Oh,
turned
so
down, but
yeah.
it wasn't long before I started getting a framework, this framework of, "Oh, I'm on a spiritual path," and then later it became clear, this whole Kundalini framework really became
Yeah, it
clear.
does help to have the context. It's, I know for me, like, the first 2 experiences I had, actually even the third one, which was more a more traditional Kundalini, where you have all the electricity moving through you instead of just feelings of bliss and expansion. It's I didn't have the proper framework for it, so I dismissed it. I dismissed the experiences, saying, "Oh, they must not have been that important. It couldn't have been true Kundalini experiences because I didn't feel like that rush of energy." Instead, like the one where the sky meets the earth, I felt more like bliss, love expanding through. And the last one that I had so far was more a sense of electricity that took me a while to get that balanced. But yeah. But anyway, I want to hear about the third one for you too.
So
Circle back to that one.
the third one, again, totally much very similar to what you had, in that sky feeling. I was in California. Oh, it had to happen in California,
In
right?
California, of course, right?
And in Monterey, Esalen or somewhere like
And
that.
excellent. Oh, nice.
Somewhere like that. I was in Monterey, and I got up really early in the morning, and I went out to do Tai Chi on the beach. And I was doing the Tai Chi, and I was doing these things. I was doing Taoist Tai Chi, which is a certain kind of Tai Chi that isn't respected by everybody who does Tai
Oh,
Chi, but it's very popular now around the world. But anyway, I was doing this thing, wave hands like clouds, and I always felt very connected when I was doing wave hands like clouds. So I'm doing this movement, and I'm looking out at the horizon, and there's the ocean and the sky, and the horizon dissolves. So
oh,
kind of like very much like what you had, that earth loves the sky, the water loves the sky, everything was
yeah.
one. And I dissolved into that oneness. And I had that as same experience of expansion, of love. I was just pounding with love. I mean, like I loved everything. Like
Oh,
love was just
wow.
radiating out of me. And so I was at a conference, and Marion Woodman was speaking, who was a great Jungian analyst, the woman who really brought Jungian thinking and feminist thinking together. I mean, she's
Hmm.
passed away now several years ago, but she was speaking. So I came into this talk, and I had my notebook, and she was giving a talk about a woman she is just starting to come back to me, a woman who had never had any love from her mother. And she's giving a talk about how this affected the person. And as she's talking, every time she like I'll just say a paragraph of speaking or whatever, she's talking, and as she did, I was writing a poem
Oh,
as
wow.
she did, with perfect meter, perfect rhyme, but it summarized the paragraph almost before she did it. So as she's talking, I wrote the whole
Hmm.
thing. I wrote her whole in this poem form. And she finished, and I had the poem finished. Do I have it? No. I ripped it out of the thing and put it on the podium, on the
You
stage.
gave it to
I
her.
don't know what around to it. I don't have it anymore. I don't know. But that was this thing. So then this lasted for weeks, this creative outpouring. And again, I was already a professional writer by that time, but I was
Yeah.
writing a lot more poetry, and I was writing more fiction, because basically, I've always been a nonfiction writer. So
Okay.
more in the journalistic trend, I write about Shakti, Shekinah, and Sophia.
Hmm.
I write about the divine feminine. Try to find new ways to write about this divine power in different ways. But I wrote a children's story, I wrote more poetry. It was just,
Wow.
and house, I lived in a little house at that time that had a gate that kind of backed onto this little park, a very tiny park. But take my dog out every morning to walk in this park. And there would be dew on the grass, and I'd look at the dew, and it was just radiant.
Oh,
And like
wow.
light was just filling me up with this dew, and I could see creatures in the dew. I mean, it was just I would so this went on for weeks, where I could see this in the dew in the mornings. And
Wow, beautiful.
I had and I've never again, I don't know if I don't think I've ever had a vision. I'd like to have a vision where my eyes are open and I see, I don't know, Mary or something.
Yeah, I know. I haven't had that either. So
And I'm in the, or, I see Sri Aurobindo or something. I don't know. I see somebody, Ramakrishna or something, or St. Francis walking toward, but I've never had that. But I had in my mind what I think some people think are visions, and maybe
Mhm.
it is, but it was in my mind. It was not in the outer world, but it was
Yeah.
so real in my mind. I had this image of Shakti, which is in Kashmiri Shaivism and in Tantric. In Tantra and in Hatha Yoga, is the idea that the divine feminine is the energy of the universe or the power of the
Oh,
universe.
interesting. Yeah.
And consciousness exists. There's consciousness, and that's often identified as Shiva, but there's consciousness. But consciousness doesn't do anything without Shakti. So
Makes
Shiva
sense.
doesn't do anything without this power.
The yin and the
And
yang.
in Sanskrit, and I am a student of Sanskrit, and I say only a student because it's really hard. But but,
Sounds like it. Yeah.
Shakti can mean power, it can mean, in contemporary terms, we'd say energy, but it means power, it can mean force. But the Shakti, this idea that the energy of the universe, that thing that I saw when I saw that candle radiating out that connected everything, that was Shakti to me in my mind. So, anyway, I had
Wow.
this
Big.
image of Shakti in my mind. Again, I can't I would like to claim it was a vision or I don't think it was, but it was in my mind, and I had this image of Shakti, and in front of her were these pots of color, of paint,
Mhm.
and she was reaching down into the paint with something like a paintbrush and painting the universe.
Oh,
Like,
isn't
she
that
was creating
something?
the park, she was painting the trees, and then I realized that everything in the pots was this energy, and, this was also at the same time when I was walking around in this park and seeing all this light, when this, image came,
Mhm. Yeah.
and it was an analogy showing me that everything was one. There was no separation. The things that we believe are separate are not separated, and that's
That's
yeah.
yeah. And there's so many people that have that imagery, which is so fascinating to me. That talk about like Jung's archetypal way he framed things with, the archetypes in the collective unconscious. And I find it so fascinating that people with mystical experiences often have visions, whether they're exterior or interior visions of Shakti.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I found that really interesting.
Me too.
The
And,
mystery.
we can talk about this now. When I went to India the first time in, in, 1977 or something, and, nobody knew what the word Kundalini was. You
Yeah, I believe that. Hmm.
didn't I mean, and yoga was already yoga was weird. So, I mean, the
Oh,
beat
yeah, I know, like, when I was a kid, I visited my grandmother, and she,
Yeah,
is meditating, and she's lived in Germany.
I
She
know.
saw me meditating and called my mom and told her I was in a cult because I was doing this weird thing sitting on the couch chanting.
No. Yeah. So, I mean, the Beatles had brought some in the late 60s and early 70s, and their guru, they went to India, and that started a lot of people going to India. I mean, people were already doing that, going to India. They certainly weren't the first, but people were finding more, that it was becoming, so you couldn't say the word Kundalini. Even in the 1990s, Kundalini was still called weird.
But still people don't really understand what it is, and that's one
Well,
reason I wanted to
I think
to do
hardly
this.
everybody understands what it is, but
No, it's, like, weird. Now at least we're exploring, and now, like, we're getting some data too, which is interesting. Is it's demystifying things. It's, let's say, taking the mystical and meeting the pragmatic, because we can actually see more what it's really like, what's happening here for people who've had these experiences where I like to call it, like, people are, like, essentially punching a hole through reality, through their reality, through three-dimensional reality, and seeing the bigger picture.
yeah.
So what's happening here? But anyway, tell me about the India thing. I want to hear about that.
I know I went to India. Gopi Krishna was, I did get in a cult. I did. And that's one of the reasons
Okay.
maybe it was, I don't call it a cult, but some of the
Well, if it
people,
didn't make you stay, it's not a cult. It's just a
well,
religious movement, you know?
it was pretty weird. But it was good for me. And the leader of this group um, went to Switzerland and met Gopi Krishna. And
Oh.
this guy was really the leader of this group. I don't really want to talk about. I'm writing about it now in this
Oh,
memoir.
nice. Can't wait. Yeah.
Yeah, I was in a cult, the kid in the cult.
The
But
kid in the cult.
I think that that wild cowgirl was what got me out of there anyway. But it wasn't that hard to leave it. I mean, you could walk away. It wasn't the same. But
Yeah.
he was the first time anybody in the world could ever tell this guy anything, and it was Gopi Krishna. So
Oh,
he
interesting.
Gopi Krishna was real, for real. This guy was for real. And he decided that he would rent a plane. And this was too bad about this guy. He's dead now, but and this was in 1977 or 78, I can't remember. But he just
Hmm.
I'm going to rent a Boeing 707 and take 300 people to India to meet Gopi Krishna.
Wow. Okay.
Krishna.
That
So
sounds cool.
I now think this little village in Kashmir, and he ended up, this guy organized the whole thing. We went to India. He got a plane, like about 300 people went, and he just convinced everybody we should go meet Gopi Krishna. And Gopi Krishna talked for 2 weeks about Kundalini. And that's where I'd read his books before then, but that's when I really started to understand this was an important thing and I needed to understand it. And it was going to be happening to more and more people, whether
Hmm.
they
Yeah.
had rapid, spontaneous Kundalini awakenings, or whether we were having a gradual transformation of consciousness.
Yes.
And at the time when Gopi Krishna died in 1984, so he's been dead a long time now, but he was saying then, the humanity's going to destroy itself, like we have to have this transformation of consciousness, and
Hmm.
we have to convince people that this is real, that
Yes.
that this and what I want to say about that is that now people are talking about it. Where,
Yes.
like this idea, if I'd said this when I tried to talk about it in the 1970s or 80s or 90s, that everything was consciousness, that was crazy. And now you go on something like, the podcast Buddha, the gas pump, which I'm going to be on
Yeah.
in the near future.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, I just clicked, I turned in consciousness, and there's all kinds of people
Oh,
talking about
oh, there's so much.
consciousness being reality, and I'm going like, man, we could have talked about this, 10 years ago, let alone
Yeah.
20, 30, 40 years ago. So yeah,
It's, I mean, now at least
it's
people, like I say,
growing, it's happening. Yeah, it's happening.
it's really happening. And that's, like one of the goals of this podcast, is just to normalize the experience so more and more people come forward and they can see, these types of experiences can happen to anyone. Cause I've come across people, business professionals, scientists who they don't want to talk about it because they're like, oh, I'm the only one and it's weird and people are going to think I'm crazy. And I
Exactly.
want people to hear other people's stories here on this podcast to realize, no, this type of thing happens to so many people. And here's how it can be framed. Here's different ways to look at it. So that's part of my goal here is just I call it normalizing the experience.
That's a great idea. I think
Yeah.
we need to know, we need to have, yeah, I think, well, here I am not even able to get a sentence out, but I'm trying to say this experience of people, being, and that's, well, in the Divine Feminine Fire, that's one of the books that I try to write about that. There's 5 women that I interview in there. And again, I wrote this book in, 20, more than, was it, came out in 2010. And I wrote the
Okay.
was in 1996. And again, I'm interviewing normal, everyday people who'd had profound experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
Yeah, like they might be an artist, they might be a writer, they might be, like a nurse, a doctor, whatever, right? And then they don't want to talk about it because they think it's they think people think they're crazy.
exactly. Yeah,
And it's
precisely.
true.
Yeah. But now it's getting better. It's getting better. The story, it's getting better. We have more and more, and the more and more of us
Yeah,
who've had these experiences now too.
and
I
who
feel like
actually
the
that,
curve.
like, uh, I'm a member, and this is maybe sound a little bit off topic, but I'm a member of the Writers Union in Canada.
Uh-huh.
And, about even like 20 years ago, another friend of mine and I, who's a poet, who is profoundly spiritual, just at her very core, the poetry she writes is just brilliant, and she's so good, and she's widely published as a poet and highly respected as a poet. But this spiritual side of her, what comes out in her poetry is okay, but other than that, she doesn't talk about it. So we
Mm.
decided we wanted to go to this writers group, the two of us, and do a talk called Coming Out of the Spiritual Closet.
We just talked about this at a writers conference
Yeah.
this last Saturday. It was a writers conference here in San Diego. We had a panel of like 6 people who precisely talked about
So there
this.
we were, 20 years
Amazing.
ago, trying to do this 20 years ago. Anyway, I'm
Wow.
pretty I mean, I'm not any stretch famous or anything, but I'm widely published.
You are extremely well known in
I've
this
got a good
area.
I've got pretty good credentials as a writer, and her credentials are even better than mine in terms of how widely published she is and stuff. We went to them and they rejected our talk. They wouldn't let
I
us.
was gonna go, you were just ahead of your time,
We so
clearly.
are, but we were saying, we wanna come out of the spiritual closet, but my point in all this is that it's really then it was really hard to do. It is easier now because of work, like, stuff you're doing,
Yeah.
but it's still hard.
It still is hard. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like
so
even
when
like
you
the
talk about normalizing the experience, it's really, really important. Yeah,
yeah, no, it's like I'm excited to bring more conversations around this.
yeah.
And especially with your focus on Kundalini and creativity, it's important. I think it also inspires people to realize what can be the result of experiencing this energy or having expansions of consciousness. It's the creativity that we really need in our, let's say, in the world today to be able to like steer, um, to steer what's happening in the right direction. We need to be creative and think out of the box. We need to release our old paradigms, and we have to be conscious in a larger way to do that. So that's why it's so
I
important.
yeah, I really like the way you're talking about creativity, about thinking outside of the box, and your podcast now, right? You were driven to do that. You had a yearning to do it,
Yeah.
and that is creative thinking, And we tend to think of, oh, you're drawing or you're painting, and I think the important thing about creativity and inspired creativity is when we take it that one step farther, like exactly what you've done here, is to take it into, yes, we can make a beautiful painting, and that might really change somebody,
Hmm.
might really trigger somebody's transformation of consciousness. I don't want to put that out. Somebody can write a novel that goes, oh my God, yes, now I understand what happened to me. I'm not trying to put that down, but I'm saying that also when we go beyond that and we
Yeah.
do something that is going to affect a larger audience or is going to change the transformation of consciousness. And again, I'm gonna rant on Gopi Krishna here a minute, but that he was ta and, like, he's writing about this in the 1950s and
Amazing.
1960s. He's writing about the transformation of consciousness, and he's writing about Shakti as the divine feminine being the trigger that we need, and, of course, this is me putting my words on it, so,
Hmm.
you know, they're not they're not words from enlightenment, believe me. But but that this Shakti, this divine feminine is what we need. we need the feminine side, and he talked about this all the time, that we've gotten so the world today, look, I mean, I know we could get off on this, and we won't, but there's bombs falling all over the
Yeah.
world. It's that masculine energy. We're gonna kill these people. We're gonna bash them into the ground. That is exactly the opposite. We've become
Mm.
one of the things, even in the 70s, he was saying, we're becoming so technological, so focused on this masculine rationality way of thinking, the rationality, the intellect, and all this compassion, the emotion, the loving energy, which I totally identify with Shakti. This sense of community, compassion, caring,
Yeah.
all those words are on our feminine side. And when you talk about wild divine bliss, that's, and you've often talked about the feminine. That's what that
Yeah.
energy roaring up in us. So when we've got the creative energy, we need it to come up and pour out into the universe.
Into the world and exactly, like, in thinking out of the box. To me,
Yes.
that is part of the
Yes.
creativity is learning how to solve problems in a way we may not have thought of, like, even in business, because sometimes I coach CEOs,
Yeah.
and it's like, how do you create this business you want to create for the good of humanity, your product for the good of humanity? How do you do this out of the box? Like,
Yeah.
what
And
is
so,
it? And it's
yeah, one of
so
the
many
people
things.
interviewing this book is doing exactly that. She
Yeah.
was doing this coaching. She was a coach. She was doing, and at a very, very high level, very corporate high level of coaching other bank managers and accountants and stuff to do exactly that. Think out of the
Yeah.
box. Yeah. And
I think
she's,
it's and I yeah.
yeah.
Had
So it's getting easier. It's
It's
not.
getting easier. Like I always say, it's like I've been thinking I think it was like last year I had this insight where I was like, huh, we think about meditation and peace, and that's really the goal of spirituality. But wait, I was like, wait, we're missing something because there'd been a dot that, a dot that tries to connect over the years. And all of a sudden it really hit me. It's the impulse of creation, that feeling you get when you're really in the midst of, we can call it Kundalini activation, expansion of consciousness, creativity. And we feel like it's the impulse of creation moving through us. So it's that plus
Oh,
the peace together is the yin and the yang. And it's like just denying that wild, it's like that wild aspect of the impulse of creation. And when we're denying that, we are denying a huge piece of our humanity. We call
yes.
it the feminine piece. People are embracing it more and more,
Sure.
but
But
it's
without
yeah.
that, that is the part that will save humanity.
Is it? Yes. And it's like, to me, we have to think out of the box because
Yeah.
technology is moving so rapidly now. Like, we have to be resilient. We have to think out of the box. We can't stay in the ways, we can't look at things the way we used to because everything is changing almost on a daily basis.
Yes.
It's pretty, and it's like, if we want to uplift the people around us, how do we do that? Right?
Yeah.
Ah, wow. Yeah. Wow. I could talk to you for a long time. That's
So,
for sure.
we're talking for over an hour, so
I know. But I love your work, especially because it's focused on Kundalini and creativity. And it's like for our listeners, I really urge you to go to Amazon to find a copy of the book. And then when is your next book coming out?
I don't know yet. I
Okay. It's
not yet.
coming. Yeah.
But these 2 are both available on Amazon. The Gopi Krishna biography, fascinating read. It's just like
Yeah.
his life was just when I wrote that biography, it's a real biography, like it's
Oh, wow.
a biography.
I
Um,
can't wait to
I
read it.
tell writing for your friends, if you're unless you're really motivated, don't write a biography. Don't do it. It's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work.
But this
Writing
was
anything
so
is.
much fun to write. He had the most fascinating life. So it's a fast read. It's not a boring biography.
Yeah.
And The Divine Feminine Fire, I just turned it, the publisher went out of business, so I turned it into an Amazon print on demand. So
Oh, brilliant. Okay, good, good. And so
Feminine
is that.
Fire, writer, I gotta plug my books there.
Yeah, you absolutely. Please do, because really want people to find your work because it's so
Yeah,
important
thank you.
to
I
really
just wanna add one little piece to exactly what you were
please.
saying,
Yeah.
is that we can call it karma yoga, right? Like, you think of you're talking about the Kundalini experience, you're talking about creativity, and then when you move it out of the box, you're moving it into the world, you're helping, you know, help, that's what we can do. And that's the essence of karma yoga, that being in the world, doing what you can. And right now, we know things are bad, right? So what can we do? We get discouraged, but we can do what little we can do. And we just need to do it. Think of
Yeah.
that. And Gopi Krishna again, but he said what people would ask, how do I awaken Kundalini? I want to awaken my Kundalini. And he'd say, you know, do karma yoga 1 hour a day.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd say, "Be of service. Just be of service. Be of service to humankind. You wanna
That's
try
really
conscious consciousness, be of service." And that's what this podcast is doing. We're being of service, right?
being of service, just
Yeah.
helping to inspire people and to like express divinity the way they feel like it's meant to move through them, and to like make room for that in their lives. To like just make room for it.
Absolutely. Very well said. Yep,
Yeah, wow. Well,
absolutely.
thank you. Thank you so much. This was really lovely. Thank you for listening to the Wild Divine Bliss podcast. If you've had a Kundalini experience or some kind of spontaneous spiritual event that completely changed your world, well, you're not crazy and you're definitely not alone. There are more grounded, intelligent people navigating this than you might think. Inside Wild Divine Bliss, we host open quarterly Zoom gatherings to the wider community. And if you want to go deeper, there are twice monthly member conversations, some courses, and carefully curated research so you can actually understand what's happening through psychology, science, and real lived experience. If that resonates, just head to wilddivinebliss.com and explore, see what fits. Thanks for being here, and I will see you next time.